Hey, it's Jesse, and I'm here to tell you a story about one of the craziest clients experience that we had in 2022. The first half of the year in 2022, inventory levels were low, interest rates level were low, and it was still gangbusters. Starting in May, the interest rate level started going up, the market started tapering off, interest rates were going up, price points were coming down a little bit, and it's just been a very, very weird situation. Now, probably the one most interesting real estate markets I've seen in my career. Now, I worked with Bill and Christina, helping them buy their first ever home. Now, they followed the process. They were 100% the most ideal client you could ever work with. They originally started out looking for a multifamily, and then they actually ended up transitioning into looking for something else. Well, they ended up finding a house that was a complete disaster. And the whole situation on the other side of the deal was a complete disaster too. So the real estate agent representing the seller happened to be the ex-wife of the current owner, and it was a divorce situation. So I'm going to tell you right now that this situation in this house and this whole entire first-time homebuyer story was one for the record books. So if you want to know exactly what made this thing crazy and all the situations that we encountered along the way and how we handled it, and whether or not the buyers ended up closing on the house and what exactly happened, I want you to hit that like button right now and stay tuned. All right, so this story starts off where I met Bill and Christina as an internet lead. Now, what an internet lead is somebody that's inquiring about a house that they want to know more about. The crazy part is that the brokerage actually had a ad running on Groupon where people could sign up to get a free buyer consultation. Well, these buyers called into the brokerage, and the broker didn't even know that they were running the ad anymore and said, hey, these buyers are looking for a buyer's consultation. They want to do it on the weekend. Would you be willing to do it? I always do buyer's consultations on Zoom. So for me, I was like, yeah, absolutely, we'll do it. So set up some time, meet with Bill and Christina, walk them through the process, which I've talked about through this entire journey of my channel, talking about how the first thing you should always do is do your recon. So I met with them, found out everything they were going through, and they were actually working on their lending with Quicken Loans. Now, I'm not going to say whether or not Quicken Loans is great, but the one thing that they were being told is they wanted to put 5% down, and they were being told that they needed to bring all this additional money to closing. And I said, have you guys reached out and spoke with another lender? Because the one thing that they're doing is they're charging, because they said that, oh, we want to work with the Quicken Loans because they're giving us this great rate. Well, Quicken Loans was giving them a great rate because they were bringing 5% down on a $400,000 home. That's 20 grand. Cash to close was actually another 30 grand on top of that. So they were being told to bring $50,000 to the closing table because their closing costs were being told that it was 30 grand. Well, that 30 grand is what was buying the rate down so substantially. So they went and spoke with another lender, compared apples to apples. We ended up getting their lending into a workable situation where we could actually get a deal accepted. And they actually wanted to buy a multifamily home because they'd been watching a lot of things on YouTube talking about how they could do house hacking. And what they learned through that experience is that it wasn't as easy as they thought it might be. Also, getting pre-approved because they didn't want to live into the multifamily was also another situation. And the good news was Bill was very handy. He was actually an electrician by trade, so he knew all about electrical work. And we were out there house hunting. They were only looking at homes in person that they really felt were the homes that they really thought that they wanted. And it eventually came to their agreement that they wanted to buy a house that needed a lot of work. Now, this is where things get real interesting. So we ended up finding this house in an unincorporated part of town that was in complete chaos. Now, one of the crazy parts about this specific house is that what we saw in the backyard when we went out to the backyard is that there was these markers in the backyard that were just sitting there, like completely out of the ordinary. And then the fence extended another 30 feet beyond that. So when we got the plat and we were looking at the yard, we noticed that the yard was only supposed to go to those stakes. So we reached out to the seller, which actually happened to be the ex-wife of the current owner. And she said what happened is that the HOA was dissolved. And when the HOA dissolved, there was a common space in the middle. So what everyone was supposed to do is they were supposed to each push their fence back into that common space 30 feet. And that's what was to happen. Well, what we noticed is that the next door neighbor's fence was pushed back even further, and that the other neighbor on the other side was pushed back even further. And what she said is that a lot of people actually didn't move their fence line. So some of the neighbors have encroached on some of the other neighbors' properties. So that was like the first red flag that we encountered. And when you looked across up in the air, we got the drone in the sky and we could see some people built pools, some people built outbuildings. Like if the neighbors ever wanted to force this issue within the times of eminent domain, they could go in there and tell them that, hey, this is my yard. Now the fence line goes back and maybe you have a free pool. You know, who knows? It would be a battle in court. I could tell you that much. So anyways, that was red flag number one. The second red flag is when we went into this house, there was in the garage, they had put in ceiling fans in the garage. And we were like, why is there ceiling fans in this garage? Well, what had happened is they actually had converted the garage into an apartment complex and they were renting the garage out as an apartment. And this house had a freaking pool that had a broken pool pump. And this is up in the Northwest where pools aren't that common. They had a broken pool pump. The pool was ultra green. It was disgusting. And then there was so much shoddy work done throughout this house. It was the perfect disaster home. I must also add that the owner was also a contractor. So it's always one of those things too. It's like a chef that goes out to McDonald's every night, right? They just don't want to do work in their own environment, or they're done with work and they're like, oh, we're done. So anyways, after talking to Bill and Christina, which all of the names have been changed for this video because I want to keep their protection, is they said, we want this house. And I was like, okay. And just remember, we also have our time to do our due diligence, which means that when you put in your offer, you have timelines in which you can do your inspections. We were at the specific location. They do sewer inspections, radon, which is a chemical that's released in the air from natural elements. If the radon level is elevated, you can put in radon mitigation systems, which gets rid of the radon. And this house also had popcorn ceilings. So the buyers wanted to test the popcorn ceilings for asbestos, which, you know, you can go look this up, but typically the popcorn ceilings aren't going to cause a problem unless you're like sanding the ceiling and then breathing that in. But the buyers were thinking about rehabbing this house. So you have to remember, so this house has freaking crazy ceiling fans and you can see freaking water damage all over. I'm just telling you just to picture the most disastrous home you've ever seen. So anyways, we put the offer in on the house and I'm in constant communication with the listing agent. She goes, look, I know your offer is 60 grand over and you're saying you're buying the house as is. And I know that there's a lot of issues with this home. I want to let you know that we are willing to do whatever it takes to get this house to close. She goes in to disclose some personal information about the divorce, about her health. And I felt really bad for her, but she said, look, whatever it takes, we need to close on this house. All right. So we go through and we do our inspection. Everything is wrong with this house. There's mold in the attic, which mold can always be mitigated. There's tons of electrical issues. The seller's like, buyer's like, I'm an electrician. I don't mind that stuff. There was dry rot. There was roofing issues, like literally everything under the sun you could imagine. Now we have 2 days of radon testing to do. So we start the process with radon and we get the radon levels back. And the radon is like 10 times what the limit should be to be safe. So now we have all of these issues inside the house. Now we have radon issues. And then we go to get a sewer scope done, which is when they take a tool, they put it down the sewer lines and it goes through and it checks and sees if there's any breaks, any offsets, any bellies, any root intrusions or anything. We get 10 feet into the sewer scope and it is freaking looking like a disaster. There's root penetration, there's an offset, there's a belly, and there's a break in the sewer line. So here's the crazy thing. We reach out to the city. This is an unincorporated part of town. So if it's incorporated, that means typically the city handles all of the sewers and everything. Well, we were told that this part of the city was unincorporated. Well, what we found out is it just had been grandfathered into incorporation. And this specific street, the sewer, anything from the sidewalk into the street was the responsibility of the city. So we actually had reached out to the city and found out that the city was responsible for the sewer line. So I'm going to tell you right now that if that ever happens, they actually were able to get the city to come out and replace the sewer line from the side of the sidewalk to the actual sewer line for no cost. And they did it really, really quick. Typically getting a sewer line replacement might take 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 6 months. But if it wasn't going to be fixed before we closed, then we weren't even going to close on the deal. So anyways, the sewer line had all these issues. Radon levels extremely high. There's roof issues. There's dry rot. Everything under the sun you can imagine, just a train wreck. And the seller said, just let me know what you guys want fixed or what you guys want, and we'll see what we can do. Now, this house was also listed at 240 grand. So our offer was 300 or so. So we submit our inspection, repair addendum, and we literally ask for everything. Radon mitigation system, sewer line, and then we wanted a credit for all the closing costs. So that way their closing costs were paid for, and then they could use some money to be used towards those repairs. We asked them to fix the roofing issue. We asked them to fix the pool issue. We asked them to fix a lot of things. And we also asked for the price to be adjusted back down to the original list price. And here's the crazy thing. Just think about this. The buyers are sitting there thinking and telling me like, look, if they're not willing to do these things, we're not going to close on this house. Yeah, we want to do some things, but we need to get the house for the right value. So the seller had already told us that if whatever they want, they're willing to fix. So I called the listing agent. You have to remember, this is the ex-wife of the seller. And she says, look, I told you whatever it takes to get this house done, we are going to do. So I have a conversation with her. I said, look, here's the thing. The sewer line's broken. Radon is elevated. The roof has issues. There's lots of electrical issues, all of the things. Like this house is a train wreck, just like you told me. She said, I know. So I said, what is fair to you guys? And that's all I asked. I said, what's fair to you guys? And she said, honestly, we're going to do anything. She's like, if your clients are okay with it, she goes, we knew that we were going to probably get $20,000 less than the list price. So she goes, so if you guys want, she goes, I would ask for a price adjustment down to 20K below list price, and then ask for all the repairs that you want. The worst thing that my ex-husband's going to say is no. So we're like, okay, cool. So you have to remember, we went way over list price to start with. So we wrote a repair addendum that said that we needed to have the price adjusted down $80,000 because we went 60,000 over. So we had the price adjusted down to $80,000. We asked them to put in a radon mitigation system, a sewer line, all the roof repairs to be done, and a credit towards closing costs, which on this client's closing costs were about $10,000. If they're putting less than 10% down as of today, the seller can only contribute up to 3% of the sales price. So if the house is $300,000, the most they can contribute is $9,000. So we actually ended up only getting them allowable right underneath that $10,000 mark because they weren't putting more than 10% down. And the house was going for, at that time, the final close price ended up being almost down to $200,000. So we submitted the repair addendum. The sellers didn't even ask a single question. They didn't send a counter offer back. No, nothing. They said 100% we're down to do it, stamped the approval, signed it. And it took us a few extra weeks to get the house closed, but I want you to stay with me because I want to tell you the good news that happened. So they closed the house, all the things. And here's the cool thing. The reason that these clients wanted to buy a house was because they wanted to build a family there. They were a young couple looking to get things started. And I always stayed in touch with them. I just wanted to see how it was going because they were going to remodel the house and all the things. So they ended up remodeling the whole house, made it look super, super dialed in. And they always send pictures like, hey, check out our house. We're having a party, all these things. She's actually sent multiple referrals to us. And they ended up getting pregnant with having their first child, which I'm super excited about. So this is just one of those stories that goes to show that this client and these buyers put a plan in place that at first it wasn't working out to their advantage, but then when they shifted gears and wanted to go down the path of finding a house that they could essentially make their own and do a lot of work to and put a lot of sweat equity into to build equity and raise their family, they were willing to do it. That is something that is super exciting. And let me tell you now too, is that they bought a house in an up and coming area, a 3-bedroom, 1-bath home that could actually had a second bathroom added in, which they did. They created it into a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, and they extended it. So there's always do all that stuff. You have to go through whatever the city regulations are and all the things. But I thought it was just an amazing experience of somebody that was willing to take a risk on home ownership and buying a house that needed a lot of work. And then having a seller on the other side that was willing to work with us and get that thing to close. It was an amazing experience. I couldn't be more excited for these clients. And I wish them nothing but health and happiness and a lifetime of memories in that house. And their ultimate goal is to turn it into a rental and buy another house down the road, which I'm sure they will. But if you guys have anything, any questions, any comments, make sure you guys hit them down in the chat box and make sure you guys hit that like button. And until next time, stay safe and we'll catch you later.